point of this lesson is to bring together all of the skills that you've learned. So there's no point learning skills unless there's an application.
Exactly.
And that's what we've been trying to do all along. So focusing less on the technique and more on the doing, so that people can have actually got a skill that they can use. It's not to say that the technique is not important, but in these very early stages, it's incredibly important not to put hurdles in the way of beginners, so that they can get on and make music. So we're going to make some music in this lesson. Which is the culmination of the 9 previous lessons, which I'll recap quickly, just so that the guys and gals out there realise just how much they've studied. Lesson 1, building a rock groove, introducing quarter notes, 3-way coordination, and probably at the heart of it all, understanding how to build up the parts that make up grooves.
Yeah, making your own music.
Absolutely. Lesson 2, which was building more rock grooves, but introducing 8th notes, changing the bass drum patterns. Lesson 3, we brought in 16th notes, so we now know quarter notes, 8th notes, 16th notes. Developing a single stroke roll, so we end up with hand coordination, which we've used in subsequent lessons, and we're going to use again today. Lesson 4, where we took quarter notes, 8th notes and 16th notes. You may remember that we juggled them up into reading exercises and then turned those into fills. And at this point, we were making a big noise about the fact that drumming is made up of grooves and fills. So putting the two together, which is going to be crucially important when we get onto our piece today. Lesson 5, we then used our quarter notes, 8th notes and 16th notes again, but in a different way, not just on the snare drum, but on the hi-hat, so that we were developing 3-way coordination in our groove playing. Then lesson 6, remember we had that 18 exercises that we introduced, because we've got the 6 different exercises from lessons 1 and 2, which were the bass drum and snare drum patterns. Then all of that hi-hat stuff from lesson 5, bring that together, suddenly you've got 18 exercises.
Breathe, Brian, breathe.
I know, there's just so much, isn't there? So that was lesson 6, and then lesson 7, we took the single stroke roll idea, introduced our accents, and a little bit more technique with the tap strokes and ghost strokes, and we started to put that onto the kit, so developing more fluency and motion. And again, we put a fill with grooves so we can link those together. Lesson 8, we moved on and created all of those accents and then mix those up again in the same kind of way that we did in lesson 4 with the mixing up of the different subdivisions. We mixed up the different accents, so we're trying to create more interesting and more sophisticated rhythms and patterns and being more musical. And we did, and we were. And we were, and we did. And then lesson 9, where we introduced a more dynamic range to the kit by introducing the cymbal as another voice on the kit that we can use to make sound. So by this point, you know a lot. Yeah, definitely. You can play a lot, and what is crucially important now is that you should have some fluency of playing, so that when you play, you can hold a beat together, you can move to fills, you can back out of those fills into grooves. You should be playing with music at home, putting on your favourite records, practicing all those exercises from all those fills from lesson 4 and lesson 7 and lesson 8, and building the pace and getting that stamina together. And now, what we're going to do is put that together into a piece of music. Now, this is the kind of music that you would get if you were, I don't know, playing in a session. I know it's a bit advanced concept for the beginners, but I want to introduce it now because, you know, the Gigajammers out there are actually pretty sophisticated players at this point.
Absolutely. Sophisticated Gigajammers, that's what we like.
Even at grade 1, they've got very useful tools that they can use. So we've written pieces, which is the same piece for the guitar, bass, keyboards and drums, so that we can all play together as a band. And this is the piece that we're going to introduce has got some very practical skills in it. So we're going to look at a piece of music. We've got the drum chart. A drum chart is, as I was saying, the piece of music a drummer would be given when they're in a session, be it a live session or a recording session, or when they're rehearsing. Have you got an example of a drum chart that we can have a look at? That's exactly what we're going to go through now. Oh, it's like I read your mind, Brian. Well, perhaps you read the script. So we've got performing a song is what we're doing here today, which is the first time, which is aptly called. This is just a simple session tune, library style music, which would be used, you know, perhaps underneath the news and weather or something like that as it gets broadcast. But it's a nice little example. And what we've got to do today is understand the chart, the drum chart, and how it works. And one of the big things is it's the geography. How do you get through it? And as an extra learning point today, I want to look at how drum charts are written, and introduce some new bits and pieces which our viewers haven't yet been introduced to. Okay, so in the lesson here, it goes into great detail, all of the steps that you need to follow.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk the viewers through by going straight through to the chart and having a good look at it. So I'll introduce what you've got here. So you've got over here, this is who it's by. It's by Gigajam. So we've written this tune.
Yeah.
This is the title of the piece.
Yes.
Which, strangely enough, is important because if you do get into a situation where you're playing lots of tunes, say if you're in a brass band or something like that, quite often if they're playing a whole concert, you'll have music after music after music. Someone calls a tune, you've got to find it from the title, obviously. So you need to know what the tune is. We've got a bit of information here because we're playing along with the extractor, and quite often in a recording situation you'll have 4 clicks at the beginning. Now we've introduced this idea into our musical exercises right the way through.
Right from the start, actually, yeah.
So our students will be familiar with the idea of working with a click, and that just means that everybody in the band all come in together at the same time. They know when the piece of music is going to be played. So when we start here, there's a real load of information, and the more familiar you become with charts, the quicker you'll take this all in and just read it as one. But we need to step through it.
I mean, to me, this looks very complex. I would sort of look at this and think, oh, it's so confusing. There's dots, lines, bits here, there, and everywhere. Do people kind of get that fear with proper sort of sheet music?
Yeah, I think they do get a bit scared of it. And the key thing is to develop your knowledge with it and to develop your experience with it. The more experience you have, the more you realise actually it's straightforward. And the other thing is that you begin to realise, particularly on the drums, is that you can interpret. I mean, we broached that subject a little bit on talking about cymbals in lesson 9.
Yeah.
The drummer does have a degree of interpretation that they can add to it, add to the music. So sometimes you don't always follow the music exactly as it's written. That's a skill that you develop over time. The great session players in this country, Ian Thomas and Ralph Salmins, they can look at a chart and they know exactly what it's saying straight away.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. So and the idea now is introducing charts to our students at this very early stage is to enable them to get into that position. Because reading is only a facility. You know, nobody wants to hear the reading. All they want to hear is you play music. So your job as a drummer or as a guitarist is to play music so when people are listening, they're going, oh, that's great, love it. They don't care whether it's got this sign here, this sign there. They just want to hear the piece of music. So anything that you can do to make the reading just a way of helping you remember the music is the key.
Okay, so how would we break this down then?
Great, let's do so. So at the beginning, we've got our sign for common time here,
yep,
our C. So we've got 4 beats in a bar. We've got crash cymbal on beat 1 and then a straightforward 8th note groove. Now the students should be familiar with that by now.
Yeah, that looks familiar. What doesn't look familiar is that sort of black smudge that you've got there.
Hey, we talked about this in lesson 9 to some extent. Here's the example that I was alluding to. Crash cymbal on the line above the hi-hat, and then we've got a slur. Now that's not technically correct, but I've had this written for me in many situations. A good friend of mine, musical director Alan Rogers, would always write a slur for a crash cymbal because, you know, a crash cymbal doesn't last for half a beat. It lasts however long it wants to, you know. It's still going now.
It's not like on a piano where you can control it with the pedals.
No. So this was Alan's way of saying to me, look, you know, that's a crash cymbal. So in a glance, I know it's a crash cymbal.
Yeah.
So I'm not really searching for what line it's on. I can see that it's a crash cymbal. And when you've got lots of pieces of music and you're trying to read things by sight, when the copyist or the arranger is thoughtful enough to write for you in such a way that you can just read it straight away, it's very helpful.
Or you could draw it on yourself, couldn't you? I mean, there's all sorts of things that you could do.
Yeah, always have a, you know, when you're doing these sessions, you should always have a pencil on you because there are quite often changes. So there we go. There's our slur, which indicates a crash cymbal here in this example. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then
that's interesting that the bars are numbered. Is that particular reasoning behind that?
Well, bars are numbered so that people can direct you to a particular bar and say, it wasn't quite right. Can we take it from bar 5?
Brian, your bar 5 wasn't so good. Can you go back, please? Try it again.
It's happened before, regrettably, but, you know, it does happen, you know, so it helps people be able to communicate in a band situation. Well, what's incredibly important here is that, you know, we've got 6 and 12 here as the bar numbers, and at the beginning you might have noticed 1 and 7. So what we really need to look at, and although it's in the course notes much earlier than we've introduced it here, this is called a repeat sign. This opens the repeat. So this means these 6 bars here, these 3 and these 3 bars here, are repeated because at the end here we've got the close of the repeat section. So when you play this tune, you're going to play these 3 bars. Yeah. Then you're going to play these 3 bars, and when you get to here, you'll kind of bounce back like a pinball to here again, and you do it all again. Yep. That means that you can play that first verse twice. It means the arranger doesn't have to write out 12 bars, he only has to write out 6. Ah,
okay, so first bar, is it also 7th bar?
Is correct.
What are we going to be doing after the break?
Well, after the break, we're going to be looking at some of the intensity that's in the music and how to practice it and then put the whole piece together.